Hey, Shalom Akim, Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Makar double honors and salutations to the elders and apostles of Great Mystery and do well, and to the Akim and the falcons of the earth, Shalom, 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 in this last days and time, preaching the word of Mashiach Yahushai, alright? So you see this executive order 83 signed by the governor of Tennessee, Bill Lee. All right. So it's just a recipe for disaster. All right, because a lot of people are worried now. Now the governor is talking about disinformation, that people gotta be careful about all this disinformation about this C-19. So it's just laying the groundwork for the people to rebel harder against the so-called powers that be. And this is fact that the elites are tightening the noose around the people's neck. All right. So if you read the whole thing, you could just pick it apart. I understand that nothing but chaos is going to come into effect when these so-called mandates are exercised, because the executive orders just it's nothing but a mandate from the government. All right, so it's gonna get a lot of people mad and upset. All right, so when you read it, it says an order to facilitate the continued response to the C-19. All right, so it's talking about. Give me 1 second. Let me pause real quick. Yeah, so that's a beautiful thing, man, that the Lord is letting these prophecies come to pass. And then here it talks about hospitalization and what it can do to to address it. All right. And then it is talking about variants, and then you hear about what it can do as per regulations, man, to make it how you say, to make it flexible, so they could have enough staffing. And then it talks about well, let's see, it talks about support for the jab as a positive and effective way to combat C-19 and to ensure that the social, economic, and educational stability and all eligible persons are strongly encouraged to absorb the jab. All right. So you see, he put his name on it. It says, now therefore I, Bill Lee, Governor of the State of Tennessee, in order to facilitate regulatory flexibility in the healthcare system, economic and other recovery, and the maintenance of federal compliance and eligibility, do hereby declare and recognize a state of emergency, and hereby order the following. So this mandate is a so-called associated with the state of emergency. All right. So number one is dealing with the staffing that can practice in the state of Tennessee. If you want to read the whole thing, you can read the whole thing. But there are certain key aspects that you're gonna want to look into and get the whole document. All right. And then number two talks about retired medical professionals can easily re-enter the healthcare workforce. All right. So what does this mean? It means that those that retired years ago can still get back in the business of joining the governor in maintaining stability and flexibility. All right. And they've already put into account that people are not going to take the jab, and they're going to be short-staffed, and it's going to create a lot of tensions, and people that got a jab, and on hard times, they can always get up in there, you know, and do and make the people comply. All right. So it says folks that are still nursing students working with a supervisor can also look after patients and administer the jab and report back to the so-called health agencies and all that stuff. So it says a graduate practical nurse practice hours or practice occurs in a healthcare institution licensed under Title 33 or 68 or an affiliate of the institution. All right, so it says that student always has to work with a supervisor. But what if you don't have enough supervisors? You know, so hey, that's how they're gonna be able to cover up their agenda, man. You know, by introducing incompetency into the system. So it says a supervisor licensed to practice professional nursing pursuant to the Tennessee Code, all right, shall do what? Is limited to supervising no more than one graduate practical nurse at a time. Well, who knows, man, when they're understaffed, what they're going to do? They're going to look the other way, all right? And the news media is going to keep it on the hush, all right? So it's just going to cause all type of chaos. And the one that people are talking about the most is the one for number 18, all right, about temporary facility to quarantine those that tested positive. Yeah, and the test and the PCR test that's not reliable will be used. You know, so it's just nothing but confusion, and it's gonna lead to a lot of chaos. All right. So just imagine, man. Just imagine how much chaos they introduce into the system. And then verse 8 talks about the National Guard and the State Guard members are going to be involved with this whole agenda. All right. So it's going to be crazy, man. All right. It's going to be crazy. So it says discretion to utilize National Guard and State Guard members in connection with certain health and emergency services operations. All right. So, hey, when someone that's trained to be a soldier is being used to enforce the mandates of a tyrannical system, you're gonna have chaos, man. Nothing but chaos. All right. And just like the Apostle Gabar mentioned, man, these soldiers are there to maintain order. And hey, this is nothing but a recipe for disaster. And that's what we're heading towards, man. That's what Babylon is is trying to start. All right. So you could read the whole thing. All right. I'm just showing you snippets. So the ambulances too have to be ready. So you can imagine when there are not enough ambulances to transport people because the other things are taking place within the city. You know, you got house fires, you got accidents, you've got violent interaction out there in the public. So what do you think is going to happen? You know, so and then you have more license, how you say, the standard of qualification for ambulance drivers. Well, hey, it's gonna be crazy, man. So I'm gonna move over to verse 14. It says telephone assessments for involuntary commitment cases are permitted. So what does that mean? The person could get committed over the phone. You know, when people have a phone interview with a so-called patient, so-called would-be patient, whoever is at the other end can decide to have that person committed, you know, to be in a mental health facility. So it says a person with a mental health illness or serious emotional disturbance based upon telephone assessment of such a person by a mandatory pre-screening agent. All right, so hey, whatever the pre-screening agent decides, that's what goes, and that person has to be taken to that facility to be committed. So you could imagine, man. You could imagine all these loopholes and all these pits and falls it's gonna cause. All right. So when the pre-screening goes south, it's gonna be crazy, man. All right. And that's all it is, man. It's just more avenue to bring chaos into the society. All right. And then it says in the part B, it says the mandatory pre-screening agent determines if the agent's professional judgment determines in the agent's professional judgment that conducting the assessment via telephone with a person is clinically appropriate. All right, that's exactly what they're trying to push. All right, so people could be experiencing some stressful moments. All of a sudden, they call in for mental health advice, and then hey, they could be picked up. All right. And then it's saying that testing for the C19 can occur at more laboratory facilities. How are you going to test for something that cannot be isolated? All right, when the PCR test should not be used for it. All right. And then it says the medical laboratory directors can monitor facilities remotely. Well, that's a hard one. They have to be there in person. All right, being away from that spot doesn't really help. And then verse 8, chapter, why you say it, man? 18 says temporary quarantine and isolation facilities may be constructed. All right, so that's what a lot of people are yelling and screaming about, man. About this temporary quarantine and isolation facilities may be constructed. So who's going to do that? The government can do that. All right. These so-called hospitals can do that. All right. So it's going to be a crazy episode, man. So it says that what? They're going to allow for the construction of temporary structures, the plans for which would otherwise be subject to review for new construction additions and substantial alterations as directed by the Commissioner of Health. All right, and the Director of TEMA in response to the C19 provided that there shall be inspection of such structures to ensure safety as necessary. All right, so hey, temporary quarantines and you people are being quarantined. Do you think they're going to allow them to leave against medical advice? Yep, so just imagine, man. Just imagine. Yep, so it's going to be chaos, man. You know, all the doubts of these people is just getting heightened, man. And this executive order does nothing but bring the paranoia of people, you know, to to the forefront, man. That's why it's important, man, to understand how these so-called governors are moving, man, because they're all on the take. All right, they're all on the take. You could read the whole thing, man. You could read the whole thing. This agenda to push for a mandate is making these people sit at the edge of their chair, you know, and they're getting nervous, man. All right. So I'm going to read from the book of Isaiah, chapter 10, verse 1. All right. Isaiah chapter 10, verse 1. It says, "Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed." All right, so it's going to cause a lot of chaos in Babylon, man. All these unrighteous decrees and the abuse of power is going to end up in making the people go mad, and they're going to be uptight, and the frustration level is going to increase. All right, so it's nothing but chaos, man, and headaches. It's going to be upon these so-called governors and all these so-called directors that are towing the line of the elites to push this C19 agenda. All right, and it's only going to make matters worse. So I'm going to read from the book of 2 Ezra chapter 6. I'm going to start from verse 22. It says, "And suddenly shall the unsown places appear unsown, the full storehouses shall suddenly be found empty." All right, so there's going to be a run on the grocery stores and warehouses because people want supplies, people want food to eat, medication, tools, and whatever they can use to survive. All right, and then it says in verse 23, "And the trumpet shall give a sound, which when every man heareth, they shall suddenly be afraid." So it's going to be a lot of chaos, man. That will make a lot of men be afraid. All right, a lot of men going to be afraid. Women, children, nothing but depression. All right, in Babylon. And then when you read 2 Ezra chapter 15, and I look at verse 16, it says, "For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another," all because of stuff like this, an executive order. And you know how these so-called disinformation agents, they're going to turn it to stir up the minds of the people, to make money off their behind. And those that see the whole facts understand that the government just has to do something. And it's going to create a lot of chaos, man. All right? So 2 Ezra chapter 15 verse 16 says, "For there shall be sedition among men, and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power." And it's going to create so much trouble. And then you hear in the so-called news reports that interstate travel will have to be restricted based on people's jab status and all that stuff, man. All right. So verse 17 says, "A man shall desire to go into a city and shall not be able." Yeah, so more chaos is coming upon Babylon, man. And then when you read Isaiah chapter 19, 1 and 2, it tells you that chaos is coming to Babylon. So it says what? In verse 1, Isaiah 19:1, "The burden of Egypt, behold, the Lord Yahweh Bashim Kakadash rideth upon a swift cloud." All right, those are his chariots, what Israelites to call UFOs, "and shall come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and the hearts of Egypt shall melt in the midst of it." So that's coming very soon, man. The Lord is going to shake the powers of the elites of this world, okay? And then what's going to happen shortly, it's in verse 2, and I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight every one against his brother, and every one against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. So it's going to be nothing but chaos, man. You know, because of oppression, all right? So it's going to make these people go mad, all right? So I'm going to read that one more precept from 2nd Ezra chapter 6. So verse 24 says, at that time shall friends fight one against another like enemies, and the earth shall stand in fear with those that dwell therein. The springs of the fountains shall stand still, and in 3 hours they shall not run. So it's going to be so much chaos. All right. So all these executive orders and mandates, man, they're just recipes for disaster, man. You know, it's just adding more fuel to the fire. And when it reaches a tipping point, the Lord is going to make the government want to strong arm these people violently, and the people are going to resist violently too. All right. So that was upon the Akim apparatus of the Lord Hamashiach Yahushua deliver us in these hours of temptation. Shalom.